Okay, so we are to Unit 3, Lesson 4. In this lesson, we are solving multi-step inequalities. So these have the same steps as solving multi-step equations, but we've got to be careful of the signs. So in Part A, to solve this inequality, it's y over negative 6 plus 7 is less than 9. So to solve that, I've got two steps to solve this. The first step, subtract 7 from both sides. So y over negative 6 is less than 2. Then to solve this, I would multiply. To finish it, I would multiply both sides by negative 6. So in the end, I would get a solution of y is greater than negative 12. And the reason it's greater than negative 12 is because I had to multiply both sides by this negative 6. So when you multiply both sides by a negative value, that switches the inequality symbol. So this would be an open circle at 12, and I would shade to the right, okay? So when you multiply or divide by a negative, we've got to remember from the last lesson, you have to flip the sign. In the next problem, to solve this, I would add 4 to both sides. So this becomes 2v is greater than or equal to 12. And then I divide both sides by 2. V is greater than or equal to 6. And that inequality stays the same because I divided both sides by a positive number. So this inequality is going to be a closed circle at 6, and it's going to be shaded to the right. Okay, it's going to be shaded to the right. So it's just two-step inequalities right now. So I'm going to give you a chance to work on this guided practice on your own. Please pause the video and work through them, and then check your answers with me. So this is to build that independence so that you can understand how to solve some of these. So try them, and then once you finish them, you can check with me for your answers. Okay, so it's good to take a minute to look at your answers, compare them to mine, and I'm going to explain. So number 1 should be pretty straightforward. I added 1 to both sides, then I divided by 4. So I got b is less than 2. For number 2, it's a little more tricky. It's knowing that this is negative 9c. So that negative sign is important because this becomes negative 9c. I divide both sides by negative 9. That causes me to flip the sign. That's why it goes from greater than or equal to less than or equal to. Okay? So for number 3, I subtract 11 from both sides. I have to multiply both sides by negative 2. That causes me to flip the sign from greater than to less than. And then in the final one, it's understanding that this is 5 minus v over 3. So v over 3 itself, that fraction, if you want to think of it as a fraction, is negative. So to isolate v, I would have to multiply both sides by negative 3. That is why this symbol goes from greater than to less than. And then all I did was I rewrote my inequality so that the variable was on the left. So I swapped everything around, okay? So moving ahead, now we're talking about inequalities with variables on both sides. So here we've got to pay attention to getting the variables to be on the same side. So that means we're going to have to subtract variable terms from both sides. So I've got 6x on one side and 2x on the other side. So I'm going to move 2x to the other side. And the way I do that is I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. So here it's really, really important that you show your work because this helps you remember how to solve these types of inequalities. So if I subtract 2x from both sides, the left-hand side turns into 4x minus 5 is less than 11 because 2x minus 2x eliminates. And then this becomes just a two-step inequality. I would add 5. This becomes 4x is less than 16. And then I divide by 4. So this becomes x is less than. 4. So if I'm doing this, I usually just move the variable from the left to the right. Whichever variable is on the right, I move that to the left-hand side, or I isolate by getting the variables on the same side. So to graph this, 3, 4, 5, open circle. I'll use a highlighter. Shade to the left. Okay, shade to the left. So, in the next couple examples, I think I made a little bit of a mistake here, so I'm going to fix that. In part B, this parentheses should be right here. That parentheses shouldn't be there. So sorry about that. So these are about simplifying before you solve. So I'd have to simplify the right-hand side. So that means I distribute 4 through the parentheses. So the left-hand side for now stays the same. And that becomes greater than 8b plus 12. And something is going to happen here. I'm going to move this 8b to the other side by subtracting 8b from both sides. And then we notice 8b minus 8b is 0, 8b minus 8b is 0. So this becomes negative 3 is greater than 12. And we should be able to tell that that is not true. So that means that this inequality has no solutions. An inequality, when we solve it, that creates a false inequality, has no solutions. Okay? So if we eliminate all the variables and we get a false inequality, that means no solutions. So for this next one, to simplify, I would multiply or distribute 2 through that parentheses. This becomes 10w minus 2 is less than or equal to 7 plus 10w. And I'm going to move this 10w on the right. I'm going to subtract 10w from both sides. Well, 10w minus 10w is 0, so this becomes negative 2 is less than or equal to 7. That creates a true inequality, so this has infinite solutions. So if you wind up eliminating all of your variables when you solve, and you get a false equation, that means no solutions. If you get a true equation, that means infinite solutions. So for this, I'd just like you to work through this guided practice, solve these, and then check your work with me to see that you did them correctly. So I'm going to pause I'm going to ask you to pause the video and work through them, and then wait for me to show my solutions. Okay, so for these inequalities, I just asked you to solve. So if you graphed them, great, but if you didn't graph them, that's okay, all right? So in number 5, I moved 3x to the other side by subtracting 3x from both sides. I got 2x minus 12 is less than or equal to negative 4. Add 12 to both sides, I got 2x is less than or equal to 8. X is less than or equal to 4. So I would just leave it as is, right? In number 6, I distribute 2 through the parentheses, and then I subtract 2k from both sides. That eliminated all of my variables. It created a true equation, all right? That's the key word there. It created a true equation. So that's infinite solutions. In number 7, I distribute negative 4 through. I add 12n to both sides. I get an inequality that is false. That means it has no solutions, okay? If I eliminate all my variables, we got to know whether it's infinite solutions or no solutions. And then finally with number 8, I distribute 3 through, and then I liked to move the 10a to the other side to make sure my variable was already on the left. I think it's a little less confusing that way. So I got negative 4a minus 3. So I finished my solving. I really, really, really want us to see. Oop, didn't mean to cross that out. I wanted the highlighter. I divided both sides by negative 4. So that caused my sign to flip. Okay, that's an important thing to understand, is when you multiply or divide both sides by a negative, it flips the inequality symbol. And then finally, a problem that has some modeling, where we write an inequality. So it says you have $300 in your checking account. Your checking account has a minimum balance of 100, so you can't go below 100. Write and solve an inequality that represents how many $20 bills you can withdraw from the account without going below the minimum balance. So you have a minimum balance that's important of 100. you currently have $320. And you want to know how many $20 bills. Okay, so I'm going to define my variable as B for $20 bills. And I'm going to write some expression to represent the amount of money in my account and how that changes when I withdraw $20 bills. So I think about this, my account is going to be decreasing in value, so I'm going to have some sort of subtraction expression. So I'm going to start with $320. And since I'm taking out bills 20 at a time, I would subtract. And the expression for the amount of money I withdraw would be 20 times B. Because if I withdraw one $20 bill, I took out 20. If I withdraw two, I took out 40. If I withdraw 5, I took out 100. So I don't want this value to drop below $100. So this value has to be greater than or equal to $100. I can't make my account go below that $100 threshold. Okay, so to solve this, I would subtract 320 from both sides. I get negative 20b is greater than or equal to, this would be negative 220. And I divide both sides by negative 20. And the important part there is we understand I've got to flip my sign. So, to not go below my minimum value, I cannot withdraw. It's important that you write this because we're translating this to English now, to a verbal answer. So we cannot withdraw more than 11 $20 bills. Okay, so it's understanding what kind of expression you write, what minimum means, what maximum means, no more than, no less than. It's important to understand those things. Okay, so I feel like you're probably ready for the next step in the lesson. Make sure that you're keeping your notes as a reference for a lot of these things, and make sure that you're taking good notes, all right? That you're paying attention, that you're not just copying stuff down, because that's not how you retain things. And that's not how you get good notes for your records later on to help you study for things like the quiz that is coming up, okay?